Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Cerini Nonprofit Leadership Series, where we explore the ideas, strategies, and leadership approaches shaping today's nonprofit sector. I'm your host, Ken Cerini, and today we're diving into a topic that's top of mind for so many organizations, building a strong organizational culture while also diversifying revenue in uncertain times. I'm excited to be joined by Michael Royce, CEO of the New York Foundation for the Arts. Michael brings a unique perspective on how mission-driven organizations can stay resilient, innovative, and aligned, even in the face of constant change. So let's jump in. So first of all, Michael, thank you very much for being part of this. We really appreciate you and your voice and everything else.
Well, thank you, Ken, for having me here. I appreciate it as well.
So the New York Foundation for the Arts supports artists across multiple disciplines and career stages. From your vantage point, what elements of organizational culture are most essential for nurturing creativity, resilience, and mission alignment within a nonprofit that serves such a diverse community?
That's a really good question. I think when possible, in any organization that, as you said, nurtures creativity, it is important when you can to have artists in those positions because their creativity brings forward to the organization the way they operate. And when the positions involve things such as presentations and workshops, problem solving, innovative thinking, and it is artists that see the world through multiple prisms. So if your employees happen to be artists as well, and at NYFA, that's our acronym for New York Foundation for the Arts, we have a lot of employees who are actually working artists. So they bring all that to the forefront in the nature of work itself. And also, I think it's important that you really seek out diverse voices because you're going to get not only those artists who see through prisms, but you're going to get people who are non-artists, right, who are bringing different perspectives, different lived experiences, which can impact quite successfully all the different nuances and layers of the projects and the operations and the partnerships. So we really stress that when we're looking to hire people and build an infrastructure.
So when you said artists in those positions, you're talking about in leadership positions within your organization, board positions within your organization. Is that what you're kind of referring to there?
Well, we do have artists on our board, but I was primarily talking about the staff. So we have, of course, many different positions within the organization, and we want to make sure that as many artists are employed in those positions, whether it's a project manager, whether it's a finance person, whether it's someone who gives workshops to other artists on how to monetize your career. We just want to make sure that most of our positions are, in fact, employing artists.
Got it. That makes sense. So you've had a steady presence in the arts sector through major economic shifts, right? I mean, we've gone through COVID, we've gone through, whatever it is we're going through right now. I'm not exactly sure what to call it. Different political changes, which has really put pressure on the arts and everything else. So how do you think your organizational culture has helped your organization remain agile and responsive during these uncertain times, especially when artists, I guess, need to evolve more quickly in today's environment than they've had to in the past?
That's also a very good question. Thank you for asking it. I think regardless of the times we will be in, or we are in, or have been in, every artist needs three things, and that's time, space, and money. And they always will need that. At the same time, well, I should say, if an organization can provide one, two, or three of those consistently, then you are helping the artist evolve during whatever time he, she, or they may be in. But also the priorities for artists, depending upon the times they're living in, can change, and they can change dramatically. And sometimes those priorities, I mean, it can be anywhere from mentorships to community building to convenings to professional development. And in these times, we've seen a great need for a space, a sacred space where people can speak their voice and not be fearful of what comes out of them and how they feel about certain things. That's become very important. And also during these times, we've been intersecting a lot with other organizations that provide things such as assistance with food insecurity, or housing or medical needs. All of those things have, in the last couple of years, ratcheted up in terms of the artist's needs so that they can, in fact, create. So we keep evolving as an organization to meet their needs as they happen.
So when are you saying then that uh, the needs go through cycles? So depending on kind of where you are organizationally or within the economic times that exist, those needs are going to change over time. And are those needs personal or more of a, do you see them more as a kind of a global sort of thing?
I think they're global. I mean, we just started a new grants program last year to provide subsidies for affordable living in New York City so that artists can apply for grants that help them with their rent or help them to move from one apartment to another because that need has become so high. But I don't think that's specific to New York City. I think it's pretty much the situation throughout the country. So it depends.
Okay. So when we kind of look at things, many nonprofits struggle to diversify revenue streams, right? I mean, you're kind of looking at, so many nonprofit organizations rely upon government funding, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we look, and the arts organizations are no different, but if you look at what's happening right now at the federal level, right? You've got cutbacks on SNAP for food programs, you've got cutbacks and even potentially more cutbacks happening in the arts. You've got concerns with respect to environmental organizations and everything else. So, there's this need to bring in additional resources, but you want to stay true to your mission. So you're not looking for a certain level of mission creep, I'm sorry, to take place. So how have you kind of balanced your financial sustainability, right? Making sure that you have those resources coming in, with staying true to your core needs of artists and cultural workers and everything.
I think, Ken, that's probably the most important challenge that everyone is facing right now in all nonprofits, regardless of the sector. Mission creep is something we take very seriously and avoid at all cost because we don't want to lose the soul of our organization. And so what we are doing is we are focusing now on earned income. Right now, contributed income is about 75% of our total budget. Used to be 100%. But right now, earned income is around 15% of our total budget. And we have plans to increase that percentage to 20 to 25% over the next 1 to 2 years through new programs and services that bring in income because people are willing to pay fees for the services that we provide rather than foundations or governments giving us contributions to support our work in general. So it's a really great question. It is a hard challenge, but the way we're addressing it is by intentionally developing new programs that bring in earned income.
I think one of the greatest challenges nonprofits have is actually trying to go through and determine what it is they have that can generate that earned income. What is the skills or the benefits that they can provide to someone that they can get paid for? How did you go through that process of identifying what you had from an organizational perspective that you felt could be monetized? And how did you go about that unveiling and pushing that process out, if you don't mind me asking?
I don't mind at all. And we're still in the process of doing that. So we restructured in July. So it's only been recently to make this new model our way of operating. But we fortunately have a job board that is probably the most go-to job board in the Northeast for artists, for opportunities and employment. And so there has been a deliberate expansion of employees in that particular department. And for example, we brought someone over from Idealist to be in that department. And then we also looked at why are foundations supporting our professional development programs to serve other organizations, arts organizations, or to serve universities or to serve artist collaboratives. Why are they doing that? And they're doing that because they believe that people have a deep desire to keep learning, like continuing ed. And in fact, that's true. So now we're starting to look at, well, how do we carve out from our professional development programs those services that people are willing to pay for on their own, right? So it's not a free or subsidized service. And Ken, I would love to come back seriously in a year from now and tell you how that all went, but we just started this. But to go to your question, we have some things already in place that we can capitalize on, and now we'll see how that evolves.
When you kind of went to unveil this, was this something that you brought together your management team? Was there a committee that was designed? Did you bring your board in? What was the kind of process that went through? Because I think there's a lot of organizations that are kind of where you were back in October, and they're kind of scratching their head saying, what's the right course of action? Who should be involved in this decision-making process? And again, where does the board come in with respect to all of this?
So on the board, we have an executive committee, of course, and that executive committee was very engaged in the process and the conversations and the thinking, because I really don't want to do something that the board doesn't approve of and doesn't agree with 100% and thinks it would be a dynamic implementation for further success. So there was a tremendous amount of thinking that went into it between me and the executive committee. And then we rolled it out. So we did not engage most of the staff in this. And that was intentional because we felt that anytime people are put up against change or asked to change or experience change, it can be very threatening. It can be scary. It can be frightening. And we wanted to be able to think very thoughtfully and carefully about the implementation, rather than responding to potential reactions from hearing about change, which aren't always rational. And that makes perfect sense. So that's the way we did it.
And how did you unveil this to the communities you serve? And because again, I think one of the big fears that organizations have is if I start charging for something, I'm going to be in a situation where everybody's going to get upset at us. I'm going to lose my members. I'm going to lose this. I'm going to lose that. How did you kind of unveil this, and how did the artists and people that you work with kind of respond?
So again, we're still unveiling, right? So we're taking programs that we currently have had and have always had that were funded by contributions, and we're tweaking them or revising them. But our job board advertisers have always paid for from day one. We don't charge the artists to seek out any but now we're trying to provide, to use corporate speak, upscale enhancements when you place an ad. Maybe you can get your ad listed as a priority at the top of the job board. That would be an extra fee. Maybe you can create a platform where artists can, or arts workers, cultural workers can apply directly to your portal through a link that's on our website. That would be an extra fee. So we're thinking through how do we create more revenue with the revenue tools we already have in place. And so at the moment, there hasn't been any kind of negative response to it because it doesn't feel like anything's changed.
Got it. That's awesome. So let's kind of shift gears a little bit. So building a strong internal culture obviously is one thing, but sustaining it across decades is another. So what practices, rituals, leadership philosophies have you found most effective for maintaining long-term cultural health at NYFA?
That is a really good question because it can be very difficult to maintain a strong culture over decades. And sometimes the difficulty is because the political or the social or the economic environment changes on us rapidly, right? From a Monday to a Tuesday. And so we try to the best of our ability to hire individuals who are passionate about our mission, right? Because if you're passionate about something, you can withstand better the battering that may come about in a long-term situation. But also if people just want to be employed by NYFA, and this is something they don't communicate to us, but it's clearly something a lot of people do simply as a stepping stone to the next better job for them, we're fine with that as well. We just want people to have a rewarding experience at NYFA, regardless of why they want to be employed by NYFA, whether it's being passionate about the mission, or simply getting their entry-level job to go to the next job, or to gain more experience. A lot of internal structure stability depends upon, and it makes perfect sense in New York City, on the type of compensation and benefits you can provide, because it's so expensive to live here. And when our resources allow us, we increase the compensation. And when it doesn't allow us, we don't increase the compensation and the benefits. And the real challenge here is when an organization is growing. Just to give you some little background, I've taken NYFA from a budget of 1.5 million a year to 24 million a year. And when I started at NYFA, we had one program that served one state. We now serve programs throughout the entire country with over 25 different programs. So
That's awesome.
When that all happens, the skill sets of your employees need to change, right? Because it's a different way of operating. It's a different way of thinking. And not all employees want to take the time to change their skill set. Not all employees want to take on greater responsibilities. Not all employees are in agreement with expanding something in their department. So that can create tension, right? And it does. So while the growth has been wonderful, creating the infrastructure to sustain it can be difficult. And I would say it's a constant challenge. Growth presents opportunities and challenges.
I think one of the things that we see out there is, communication is super important, right? And I think the statistic is that more or an individual is more likely to leave a nonprofit than they are to leave a for-profit, not because necessarily of the salary, even though that is an issue that comes into play, but part of that is also the communication, because nonprofits do not always do an effective job of communicating with their staff what their upward potential and upward mobility is. How do you kind of build that into your culture within your organization in terms of having that open, vital communication that's essential to promote and ensure retention within the staff?
It's not easy. So you're right. Communication is one of the critical points of sustainability and vital operations. And at NYFA, we really only have 5 levels, right? There's not a lot of room for growth because there are only 5 levels. And then there are those salaries have limited bands. Each level has, a salary band. And so I think people can become frustrated, even though the communication is clear, right? These are our bands, these are their levels. We can promote when a position opens, right? We can't promote just to promote. I think that people find that very frustrating. And some people choose to leave because they're not promoted or their compensation is not going up as quickly as they wish it to go up. And they're tough conversations. They are. And you just have to accept that that's part of running a nonprofit. I mean, I would say, and I think this is a dangerous thing to say, but I think the nonprofit sector sometimes should be considered broken. When you look at its history, right, it really was formed from people who had the time to volunteer, primarily wealthy people who had a lot of time on their hand to roll up their sleeves and do the work needed to help the community. As the nonprofits professionalized, right, and those volunteers still didn't need any kind of compensation, but now maybe they needed their first executive director or their first manager. The beginning of the budgeting process to actually pay someone was not thought of when this all started. And so we ran into a situation where, especially during the 60s, people were working at nonprofits making very small salaries because the culture sort of communicated that that was a great thing to do, right? And you could. When I first moved to New York City, I lived in a studio apartment at $180 a month, my own place for $180 a month, right? I cleaned apartments. That's how I made my living. I maybe cleaned 6 apartments a week and I was fine, to live my life in New York City. Just can't do that anymore. And then I moved into a very small nonprofit that paid me a very small salary, but it was more than cleaning apartments, right? Again, just fine. But the world has changed. New York City has changed. So it's broken at the moment and we need to fix it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think this kind of leads back to what we've been talking about in terms of revenue diversification, right? I mean, you're dealing with a situation where the sector faces high funding volatility, right? So you've got this volatility that exists within the governmental funding streams, depending on who's in office or what the um, climate is with respect to the arts. You have a lot more competition for fundraising dollars. The amount of money that the typical donor is giving is going down, and you have a lot less typical donors. So the reason that fundraising is going up is because you got more high net worth individuals contributing. So if you don't have access to those high net worth individuals, again, that just adds to the whole volatility and adds to the, as you were saying before, people want promotions, people want growth and everything, but you can't provide that if you don't have stability and growth within your organization, which kind of creates that difficulty. So I guess my question to you is, how do you, given the things we're talking about here, how do you encourage your staff and board members to think creatively and maybe unconventionally about revenue opportunities without kind of compromising the artist community's trust?
I think it goes back to what we've already discussed, right? And that is the earned income intention. So, for example, not only is the staff being asked to look at opportunities to create earned income, but the board as well. And in fact, there's a meeting this afternoon with board members on how to possibly help us create earned income through their expertise, right? So this would be a first for NYFA, where the board members are actively engaged in providing services from their sectors with their expertise, with their knowledge, with their credentials, with their networks to bring in earned income to NYFA. Normally, and I don't know how it is for other organizations, but board members have a financial obligation every year, which we deeply appreciate, and they write that check, which we deeply appreciate, and they discuss governing issues and they provide leadership, and all of that, again, is deeply appreciated. But this is the first time at our organization where, if this is successful, board members will be rolling up their sleeves, not to help us think through operations, but to actually help us generate earned income, which is quite different from contributed income. So we're not asking them to go to their networks. We're not asking them to inquire from the friends for checks. We're not asking that. We're asking them to deliver skills to our networks, to our constituents that people are willing to pay for because of who they are and their background. I don't know whether we'll succeed or not, but I am very excited about this change, very excited, and this collaboration between the board and the staff.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. The one drawback from that, though, is how do you deal with board turnover then? Because if you've got board turnover and you've got services that are being delivered and a board member who's delivering certain services leaves, how do you replace that board member in that model? Or is your goal to start kind of creating some of these services, develop a kind of a branch of it, and then maybe bring in people to run it internally so that, again, turnover at the board level isn't going to have a negative impact on your bottom line?
We have a very low turnover on our board. We have no term limits. People tend to stay for a very long time. And my thought is, because for whatever reason, a board member may leave the NYFA board, it seems they still remain passionate about our mission, even after they've left, right? And are still willing to contribute to us. So I do believe that in that particular situation, a board member would continue to volunteer their services in this way, assuming it doesn't take up too much of their time. Because right now, what we're trying to create is a program where, because our board members, especially our corporate board members, are extraordinarily busy trying to fulfill their requirements at the corporations they work at, right? And they have very little time. And so even if they leave, I think they'll still have and will want to provide the time to do this.
So you have a broad network of artists that you work with.
Yes.
I'm sure that there are businesses, companies out there that are interested in being in front of or working with the artist community that you work with.
Yes.
Have you looked at the potential of corporate partnerships and things like that as a way of creating additional earned income for your organization?
This is part of the thinking that's going into this meeting today. So we haven't tried it out yet, but we're investigating the ideas and concepts behind it.
Cool. So talking about those thousands of artists who you kind of work with, who lead creative organizations or entrepreneurial projects, what lessons from those artists' resilience and innovation have influenced your leadership style?
Oh, that's a really, really, really good question. You know, I think by osmosis, really. Um, I have learned a great deal from artists because I've come to believe they are some of the most resilient people I've ever met, ever, because I've watched so many of them go through very difficult and very dark times in their careers. And still, in the midst of all of that, when I talk to them, right, they still continue to create, they still continue to dream, and they still continue to walk towards their future as they see it, one step at a time, regardless of all the obstacles they face. And I have found that to be incredibly inspiring. Um, and I'm grateful to them actually for teaching me that lesson, even if it was unconscious, right? And so I think that I lead by modeling them, right? No matter what the obstacles are, I put one foot in front of the other to walk into the future because they've taught me to do that. And another thing they've taught me to do, and this brings great joy to my heart, is they've taught me to live in the moment, actually. When they're in the process of creating, right, they're not in the past and they're not in the future. They may bring components of that into the work that they're creating, but they are so engaged with where they are in that moment, doing whatever it is they're doing, that their presence is so powerful, right? They are living life as it happens. They are not thinking about the results. And so watching that, being part of that, seeing how they fully invest their heart, their souls, their brains, their life's experiences into what they create, exemplifies to me a remarkable state of living and what it is to be human, right? So from that, I try to bring into my own work how to stay in the moment. I find it very difficult and I often don't succeed. But having seen that over and over and over, because artists have gratefully let me come to their studios and watch them work. You know, I sit in the corner, I don't say a word, try not even to breathe. But when I observe how they are in that moment, I think to myself, that's the way to live if you can, every single moment. So that's part of my
That
leadership.
is super, super, super cool.
Yeah, it is. I feel so lucky to have witnessed that over and over again.
And kind of after that passionate little component here, I kind of feel like I'm shifting gears and sorry about this, but I mean, obviously, everybody is interested in impact, right? That's kind of the new way of kind of looking at everything. And it's not always easily quantifiable in nonprofit organizations and especially in art organizations. How do you approach measuring success in a way that reflects both cultural value and organizational accountability?
Well, I actually don't like that question, but that's okay.
Sorry.
I don't, it is a truth about the arts in that it's very hard to measure it. But I often, counter that question with why do we have to measure anything at all? Why is that important, right? When you're talking about human creativity, when you're talking about the human spirit, why do we even need to think about quantifying that? And sometimes it really gets my backbone. But you've asked the question, so let me think for a moment. so I can answer it. I'll say that sometimes our funders have very specific impact measurements they want to see in their final report, and that's why they fund you. And that could be anything from, did an exhibition come out of this funding, right? They would like to know that. Or how many people did you serve, right? Or how many marginalized groups were able to take this opportunity because they funded it, right? So that's all measurable. It's all very measurable, and we can provide those answers for them. But I think the thing that's most important to me is, how do we measure the experience that our artists go through or receive when they receive one of our programs or services, right? How do you measure the experience, and how do you measure what that experience does for them as they go about their career? And so we do a lot of surveys. After every program or service, we do a survey, right? We don't get 100% response, but sometimes we'll get 80% or 90%. And we do a ranking, from 1 to 5, the whole thing. And then we have an open narrative where people can write about how to make it better, what they liked, what they didn't like. And we keep tweaking and revising our programs and services based on what they say. So our ability to listen to our constituents and lead from what their needs are and what their take is on how we're serving them is critical, I think, to NYFA being an organization that nurtures people in a way that they need to be nurtured, rather than assuming how they want to be nurtured. So yes, we can quantify the experience to the, can you really quantify it? I don't know, but we try our best to do it.
I apologize. That was an accountant question. I have to get out of the, what is it, right side of my brain and moving more into the left side, or whichever side of the
Everyone
brain I'm
wants
supposed
to
to be
know.
in.
It's a question everyone asks, and it's just a question I don't like. But I hope I answered it in a
That
way
was
that.
awesome. Yeah. So we're running out of time. We're actually completely out of time, but I want to throw one last question at you before I kind of wrap this up.
Sure.
So if we kind of look ahead, and what shifts do you see coming for a mission-driven organization in terms of cultural building and revenue strategy? And how is NYFA preparing for the next era of nonprofit leadership?
Well, going back to the dangerous thing of saying that I believe nonprofits at this point in time could be considered broken, right? And we need to fix the problems. I think the new leadership is going to come from those that are always thinking like an entrepreneur,
Mhm.
um, and always thinking like a gig worker, and always thinking like someone who is creating a startup, because there's less stability every single day for nonprofits, and crisis management is a huge thing right now that leaders
Mhm.
need to possess inside of themselves, because almost every day could be considered a crisis, little or small, big, large. It's just not the way it used to be. There's nothing you can depend on anymore. So the new leaders will be people who maybe had their own business for a while, right? And then decided to go into the nonprofit world, or maybe didn't even go to college, right? They just went out there and they just started working, and they just started finding their skill set from learning. Um, or maybe it's people who are coming from the for-profit world, right? Who have theoretically all the skill sets, all the training, but they're just fed up with the infrastructure of the for-profit world and how it's driven. And they want to really, from their heart and soul, accept a much, much lower salary, and be happier in life. So that's what I'm thinking the future is going to bring to nonprofits.
Yeah, and I think, you brought up the crisis management component, but I think, nonprofit leadership also needs to kind of meld into all of that, the continual need to look to the future and strategize and everything else. I think coming out of COVID, coming into the environment we're in now, I think everything's been very reactionary. And I think, leadership needs to continue to move into that proactive approach too. So I think that's
Yeah,
important also.
I agree with you 100%.
So, Michael, thank you so much for sharing your insight and for the incredible work you and the team at NYFA are doing to support artists and strengthening the cultural community. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. If you found this conversation helpful, be sure to like, subscribe, and share this episode with your network so we continue bringing you conversations with leaders like Michael who are shaping the nonprofit sector. We'll see you next time on the Cerini Nonprofit Leadership Series. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye, everyone.